And welcome back. Right now, we're bringing you Special Decision 2020 coverage. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Curtis.
And I'm Kadiva Devine. Right now, we are getting our first looks at the results of Arizona's primary elections, which took place today.
Team 12 political insider Bram Resnick joins us once again. And Bram, there are a few key races that we're keeping a close eye on.
That's right, Mark. Several key races. I got my laptop here, phone here, checking everything, trying to tweet at the same time. Let's give you the headline races. Martha McSally in Maricopa County is crushing Daniel McCarthy in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate. McSally with more than 70% of the vote, 78% of the vote. McCarthy with 21% of the vote. I'll tell you off the top, the county count is ahead of the statewide count. So that is more votes in the county, on the county's tabulation, than we've seen right now on the statewide tabulation. Still, Maricopa, the largest county in the state, about half the ballots in Maricopa County have been counted. And again, Martha McSally with a 78%, 21% lead. Another race we're watching closely, Sheriff Joe Arpaio wants his job back as sheriff, the one he lost in 2016. He is in a dead heat right now with his former top deputy, Jerry Sheridan. They're about 500 votes apart. Again, half the ballots are in here in Maricopa County, so it could be a long night for that race. A couple of other races we're watching closely. For the county attorney, Democratic primary there. Julie Gungle appears to be running away with that primary, three-person primary. She has a significant lead over Bob McWhirter and Will Knight. Again, half the ballots counted here in Maricopa. Also, CD6, the race to decide who will take on Congressman David Schweikert in the fall. Hiro Tipernini leading the four-person field with slightly more than 50% of the vote. It appears she will take that race as well, but a 20% lead, 20-point lead over her next closest opponent. So for the races we're watching closely, one Republican race folks are paying a lot of attention to in the state legislature, LD 15 in the North Valley, a civil war among Republicans. State Rep Nancy Bardo primarying State Senator Heather Carter a moderate, Bardo a social conservative. Bardo has a slight lead in that race. Don't know what percentage of the votes have been counted yet. Perhaps we can assume half. Don't know for sure, but could be a long night there. We are expecting more votes coming in from the county at some time tonight. This isn't the last vote dump. And again, we're paying close attention to the Secretary of State's website, which counts all the ballots takes in all the ballot counts, from all the counties for the statewide races and puts them up on its site. So we're going to be watching that closely to see how the McSally race is going. And there you see the McSally results there. McSally needs to beat Daniel McCarthy and needs to beat him by a lot to show that she is a viable candidate. And so far, she is doing that. She is behind in the polls to her Democratic opponent in the fall, Mark Kelly, down anywhere from 7 to 10 points. So a strong, an overwhelming defeat of Daniel McCarthy would help her in some measure. Mark Caribe?
Bram, you know, we're coming off the summer of protests where people were, calling for justice of our law enforcement system, our criminal justice system. Can you kind of talk about how significant this county attorney race is going to be for Maricopa County?
Yeah, this will be very interesting. So let's talk about the Republican. Republican County Attorney Alistair Adele was appointed to the job late last year after former County Attorney Bill Montgomery was named to the state Supreme Court. She has never run for office. She was appointed to the job. She's running for the first time in the fall. It appears she'll be facing Julie Gungle, former Cook County prosecutor, has a lot of experience in that area. And the three-person race, criminal justice issues dominated much of it. And it's clear that will be an issue going forward, really perhaps one of the top issues in this race for the first time in recent memory, given everything that's happened, the George Floyd protests, Black Lives Matter. And even more than that, this has been percolating here in the Valley for many, many years. And this campaign, this Maricopa County Attorney election in the fall could bring a lot of that out, a lot of that debate out, and perhaps result in some policy changes. based on whomever is elected in November. Caribe?
Bram, 95% of the vote, we think roughly, has been by mail for this primary. Not surprising considering the climate out there with COVID-19. But are we seeing it in other primaries across the country? And the second part of the question, does it foreshadow what we could see in November, which is something that President Trump has said he does not want to see, which is a large mail-in election?
Well, a couple things. President Trump said today, Florida does a great job with mail-in or absentee votes. They're really the same thing. So maybe he's changed his mind, and maybe he'll change his mind again tomorrow. And another thing about the way we voted in this primary, it's very different, and a lot of people have to kind of get their heads around it. So yes, about 90 to 95% of the vote was early, either in mail-in ballots, the bulk of it, or people voting in person for the first time in this pandemic primary. Many people here in Maricopa County had the chance to vote in person starting as much as 3-4 weeks ago. That's brand new. There are many polling places open 3-4 weeks ago, so you could go in person and avoid a big crunch at the polls today, and it played out the way folks at the county designed it. And by the end of tonight, the end of this week, whenever this election ramps up, it may prove to be a model for the rest of the country, because what I hear coming out of New York and other places is we've been doing this for almost 25 years, voting by mail. Other places haven't. And so we may be the model for other parts of the country. Now, can they bring it all together, bring this whole process together the way we did? I don't know. I mean, you might say if the pandemic hadn't happened, would we have done this? I'm not so sure. But it's moving along, voting by mail and giving people more opportunities to vote than they've ever had before. That is moving along much faster thanks to the pandemic. Of course, there's a whole battle over voter rights and suppressing the vote, and that takes place in a different arena.
Bram, you brought up a familiar name that we haven't heard in a while, which was Joe Arpaio. He's going up against 3 others for the Republican nomination. He'll go up against, if he were to receive the nomination, he'll go up against Paul Penzone, who he lost to in a very big way in the last election. If he were the nominee, I mean, how do you think he would fare up against Paul Penzone?
I think, I think many Republicans have come over to Paul Penzone's side. Paul Penzone won in 2016, in part because of the Latino vote, which grows about 2% a year and is becoming more and more significant. But Paul Penzone could not have won in 2016 if Republicans hadn't come over to his side, and they did. They were pretty much sick of Joe Arpaio. And what ultimately flipped them was the cost of all his misdeeds, of the racial profiling, of the deaths in the jail, and so many other things. The money was a big deal. That really hit home. And again, the national headlines were a big deal. And that led to Joe Arpaio's undoing. It's very difficult to see how he could overcome that. And for Republicans, they might be concerned that having Joe Arpaio on the ticket, on the ballot, gives Democrats a chance to say, hey, he's on your team. What do you think of that? Not a look and not a question I think Republicans really want to answer.
Bram, look, the McSally-Kelly race has already been very nasty. I'm sure if you're Mark Kelly's camp, you've been looking for a chink in the armor tonight to see if, in any way, if McSally is vulnerable. It doesn't appear, at least from the early results, that she is. It looks like that's who we'll see going head-to-head. Can this get any nastier than it already is?
Oh, of course. We just don't know how. Or it just can be relentlessly nasty, which is kind of the way the 2018 race played out. You remember Martha McSally went after now Senator Kyrsten Sinema pretty hard for a long time. Her campaign did, with some pretty rough stuff, and it got even worse when it came time for the debates. What's so interesting and so different, and I'll state the obvious here, about this election is, this pandemic election is, you don't have that as much contact with the candidates as you have in the past, which kind of creates more of those opportunities for candidates to spout off about the other. It may be all over the air, the airwaves, and you can't forget, and maybe it's a good time to pause and just remind folks how significant this election is from your street level here in the Valley all the way to the White House. Arizona is going to help decide who wins the White House, who wins the U.S. Senate. We have legislative races that may tilt the balance of the legislature from Republican to Democrat. There are mayor's races folks are voting on today. A lot of elections, a lot of new elected officials who could change our world, who could come up with policies, ideas we haven't seen before.
And Bram, it blows my mind to think this. You've lived here long enough to know. Arizona, a traditionally red state for so long, synonymous with the GOP. Should the polling remain the same, Mark Kelly leading Martha McSally, who would have ever thought that we'd see two Democratic senators from Arizona sitting in Washington?
And that would be the first time, I believe, in Arizona history. Kyrsten Sinema was the first Democrat elected in a little over 25 years, I believe. Mark McSally would be taking John McCain's seat in the U.S. Senate, seat once held by Barry Goldwater. Interesting, you have former military pilots, all of them, Mark Kelly, a Democrat. You just have to go back. We've been here a while, and don't forget, voters change. This state changes. New people come in. People who were born 20 years ago are casting their first vote this year. We're a place of constant change, and this is what you're seeing happening. Nothing stays the same. You've seen 10 years almost of Republican grip on power, and over the last few years, starting in 2016, it's been slipping away. And we'll see how much more it slips or doesn't in November.
And you talk about that change, Bram. In the primary election 2 years ago, independents were requesting Republican ballots more than they were Democrat ballots. So what will this primary kind of tell us about voter enthusiasm moving forward?
Well, we're seeing a record turnout in raw numbers in this primary, and have to add the number of registered voters has increased since 2018. At the same time, the number of registered Democrats has increased faster than the number of registered Republicans. That should tell you something regarding independents requesting ballots. Anecdotally, independents are requesting or have requested more Democratic ballots for this primary. As you know, if you're an independent, you have to pick a party if you want to vote in a primary. That's the way it works here. And so this year, they're requesting more Democratic ballots. That is a definite indicator, because you can't just rely on members of your own party to win. You need the independents. Polls show, Senate poll, presidential poll, they are trending Democratic. And what are we now? 90 days, 91 days, I think, or so, till the election. It's coming fast.
I think the Republican Party senses that Arizona is in the process of, if not turning blue, at least turning very purple for November. And we haven't even touched, and we probably should for just a second, on David Schweikert.
David Schweikert. So that's going to be an interesting race. You mentioned Arizona turning purple. That CD6 in the Northeast Valley is sort of part of what we call the purple loop. If you took the Loop 101 around the valley from North Valley all the way down to Southeast, you would find pockets of purple. Districts that may have voted for Donald Trump in 2016 but voted for Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, or voted for Republican Governor Doug Ducey in 2018 and Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, or Paul Penzone in 2016. And so David Schweikert is in one of those districts. He's had a pretty comfortable ride, 5-term congressman. It could end this year, given the ethics case against him, which is very severe. And if indeed Hiral Tipirneni, now there you see she has a 19-point lead right now over her next closest opponent, Anita Malik. If that lead holds, Hiral Tipirneni has proved to be a very proficient fundraiser. David Schweikert has never faced an opponent like Hiral Tipirneni in a year like 2020, and in the position he is in, having just been reprimanded by the full House of Representatives, admitting to 11 ethics violations. That's pretty tough. It is a majority or a plurality Republican district. Republicans represent the largest block of voters. But you have a large number of independents, and you have the Democratic vote growing there again faster than the Republican vote since 2016. That is a very tough race, and Democrats, given all the money sloshing around in Arizona right now, national Democrats have to be looking at that race as a potential pickup.
All right, Bram, you've got a lot of work to do between now and 10 o'clock when you look ahead to November and get us caught up on. We should have a lot more to talk about tonight at 10 as these votes continue to come in because a lot of them came in so early. So we'll check in with you again later on tonight at 10. And of course, we'll be tracking the latest results all evening long on 12news.com and the free 12 News app. And again, we'll be looking ahead to the November matchups when we see you back here in about 90 minutes for 12 News at 10.